Hello, and welcome back to the Amazing Spider-Man Classics Season 2. Today we are going to be covering Amazing Spider-Man number 5 and Amazing Spider-Man number 6. I am your co-host, Javi Trujillo, and as always, I am joined by my... What are you, son? My son! I guess. I was going to say partner in crime, but... I mean, this is a hero podcast. We're talking Spider-Man. So, as always, I am joined by my son, Jack Trujillo.
Wouldn't I be the co-host, though?
Yeah, well, no, we're co-hosts. So, like, I'm a host, you're a host. We're co-hosting because it's not my show and you're a guest. It's our show. So, we're co-hosts.
Okay.
So, now that we've got that out of the way... today is a special episode for me because we're going to talk about two issues, but one of which is pretty much what I attribute as to the start of my Spider-Man fandom, and that is Amazing Spider-Man number 5. So I am so eager to talk about this, and we're just going to get started right off the bat, unless there's anything you want to bring up before we get into the meat of things.
Nah.
All right. So, Amazing Spider-Man number 5, October 1963, Marked for Destruction by Dr. Doom. Stan Lee writer, Steve Ditko plot assistant art, Sam Rosen letters, and Art Simic did the cover letters. As always, these show notes... The synopsis is taken from the Amazing Spider-Man official index to the Marvel Universe. So J. Jonah Jameson sends out more television messages in which he labels Spider-Man as a criminal. Dr. Doom sees one and decides to make Spider-Man his partner. Using an apparatus connected to a live spider, he makes contact with the hero using his spider sense, and they hold a meeting, but Spider-Man soon realizes that Doom is a villain. Spider-Man tries to web Doom up, only to find he had webbed up one of his robot duplicates. The real Doom appears and attacks Spider-Man, who narrowly escapes. Meanwhile, Flash decides to dress up as Spider-Man to play a joke on Peter. Unfortunately, Dr. Doom finds him first, mistaking him for the real Spider-Man. Doom makes a television broadcast in which he threatens to execute Spider-Man, that's in air quotes, unless the Fantastic Four surrender to him. Peter sees this and sets out to save Flash. Spider-Man is barely able to hold his own against Doom's many traps and another robot duplicate, but when the Fantastic Four arrive, Doom realizes he cannot fight all 5 at once and departs. Spider-Man leaves as well, leaving the Fantastic Four to set Flash free. The next day at school, Flash boasts about his encounter with Doom, making himself out as a hero. Like he does, because Flash is gonna flash.
Of course.
So, my first exposure to this wasn't as Amazing Spider-Man number 5, but as Marvel Tales starring Spider-Man number 142, cover dated August of 1962. 1962. Geez, 1982. So, my memory is of my dad, your grandfather, taking me to a Quick Mart, which is a convenience store chain. And there was this thing once upon a time called a spinner rack. And on this spinner rack, they had comic book magazines. Pretty much Marvel and DC books, because they were the two big publishers. And for a whopping 60 cents, your grandfather bought me this issue, 142, which reprints Amazing Spider-Man number 5. He also bought Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 69. I was going to stay over at my cousin Rob's that night for like just a cousin hangout, sleepover, get-together thing. And so he got a comic for me and one for my cousin. Why he chose that, or if I picked who got what comic, I don't remember. But I'm sure I knew Spider-Man from the cartoons, either the 60s show in syndication or whatever Spider-Man was on at the time. I don't remember if it was Spider-Man or Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, but I feel like I would have had a knowledge of Spider-Man. But this is the first comic I remember ever getting. It's the first Spider-Man story I remember getting. So because of that, I always kind of felt like I was in on the ground floor. Like, I didn't have issues 1 through 4, but, you know, I kept up pretty regularly with this, because at that point they had started over with Amazing Fantasy 15 and went straight through to at least issue 50, if not further, printing in order, you know, once a month. And once they get to a certain point, like to the Romita era, they upgraded the paper a little bit and the coloring, so it wasn't this kind of faded paper that looks like newspaper that bleeds a lot with the colors. So this, I remember being my first Spidey comic, and I read it over and over and over. And this copy of Marvel Tales that I'm holding right now is not the one I had back in 1982, because I read that thing to pieces. I mean, there's not a lot of comics that I had at the time that have made it to this present day. Like some Batman, Superman, World's Finest stuff. But like all my early 80s stuff didn't make it, because usually I would read them for a while and then eventually trade them in at this secondhand bookstore called Bookman's and then get new comics. The exception being my Marvel Tales run. I kept those in a stack on my bookshelf, and this is before I knew about bags and boards or anything, so they just get stacked there like magazines get stacked and get worn out, either from me reading them or just being manhandled incorrectly by a 5-year-old becoming 6, becoming 7. So not the best care. So very, very few comics that I have from the 80s are the ones that I owned. Amazing Spider-Man 275 is from the 80s that I still have, and it's in decent condition, but that's not this comic. So starting off, like right at the beginning, like this issue perfectly sets the tone right, literally from the first page. You get the title, you get this great art by Steve Ditko of Spider-Man, kind of surprised, facing off against Doctor Doom, was kind of like, rah! But surrounding them, like, it introduces the cast to you. You've got a little box showing Peter Parker, alias Spider-Man, the awesome Doctor Doom, J. Jonah Jameson and his secretary Betty Brant, featuring Flash Thompson, Liz Allen. They were sort of classmates, so cast of extras there. Question mark, the other Spider-Man, and then a little box in the corner, and the world's most fabulous super team, which has the Baxter Building, which has a Fantastic Four signal, apparently. So Stan Lee always talked about, you know, writing comics, that every comic could be someone's first, whether it's number 1 issue or number 124. And this is a perfect example of that, because not, you know, knowing really much of anything, like it's all right here on this first page. Like, I know who everyone major in this story is going to be, thanks to the way it's laid out. And it immediately goes into Jonah on the TV railing against Spider-Man and how he's a menace. I mean, this is what so much of everything that has come forward comes from this. You know, it's issue 5, and you've got Jonah saying how awful Spider-Man is, and people commenting about it. And that's in all the movies, that's in the video games, in the cartoons. And it's interesting here to me because, like, here's Peter hanging out with, you know, the kids, his peers at the bowling alley. But it's like, did he just randomly show up? Did they invite him? Did Flash invite him just so he had someone to pick on? But then he's like, get out of here, get lost. You know, I'm unsure on what the social structure is of how they all came to be and whatnot, but neither here nor there. We quickly go into a flashback. So if you don't know who Doctor Doom is, he espouses on what's going on with him, how he narrowly escaped the Fantastic Four, and how he's going to get his revenge. And it's not something you see a lot of these days, but he makes a device to talk to Spider-Man on a spider wave transmitter. So very similar to how the Chameleon in the first issue tries to get at Spidey through a spider sense. You would think if they knew how to do this in the first place, they would kind of use it more often to either mess with Spider-Man and get him off the board, or just keep reaching him whenever they needed him. But it's a plot device that gets dropped over time. And I like how Peter is in his room practicing with his web. So not only does it show his inventiveness because he made the web shooters, but like anyone, like an officer with a gun, he's practicing his marksmanship. Here's Spider-Man practicing the different types of webs he can make, and it's something that we see in the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire practicing in his bedroom. It seems like that made me feel like they really got the essence of Spider-Man in that first movie, because here I was seeing these images that I read about in 1982 brought to life in 2002. But it quickly leads to Doom and Spidey having a get together, and you quickly get introduced to like Doombots and duplicates and this weird trap door that Doctor Doom has, and it's just, I don't know, man, it's just everything. And it's weird too, because like this is Spider-Man's 5th issue. We had the Chameleon, we had the Vulture and the Tinkerer, we had Doc Ock, we had Sandman. So we were already off to a good start, but by the 5th issue, we have a guest villain, I guess. But while Doctor Doom is a key part of the Marvel Universe, like, I wouldn't go out of my way to call him a Spider-Man villain by any stretch of the imagination, but he has crossed paths with Spider-Man a lot, be it in Secret Wars or Amazing Spider-Man 350, and also during the JMS run later on. So while he's not a Spider-Man villain, like, to me, there's something about him being there that makes sense to me. Like, I appreciate it because of this issue that I had as a kid. And it also helps too that when the Marvel Secret Wars action figures came out in the 80s, the only villain I had from the line was Doctor Doom. So it made sense to me that I had Spider-Man figures to fight Doctor Doom, because I saw them do that in the comics since I was a little boy. So we get Peter snapping photos for the Bugle, and when he goes to drop them off, he notices Betty Brant, how pretty she is. He's starting to realize this. And here we come to Flash with his homemade Spider-Man costume. I like how Ditko makes it look just a little bit baggy. They go about pulling the prank right when Doctor Doom is going to kidnap Spider-Man. So he's tracking down Spider-Man, I'm sorry, who happens to be walking by Flash at the time. So, of course, it works out that he gets the two confused and pays no attention to Peter.
I said, I would think you would... So, I know Peter right now is just walking past Lost in Thought, but Doctor Doom arrives in a helicopter that's just over a fence.
Well, it's a stealth helicopter, clearly. But, yeah. Yeah, well, you can tell it's a stealth helicopter because there's no onomatopoeia saying, like, swoosh, to let you know you can hear helicopter blades. Yeah, it's a good observation there, son. I never really thought about that before. So, surprisingly, I'm looking at the Marvel Tales copy right now. There's a reference to the Ed Sullivan Show, and I'm surprised that actually made it into this edition, because a lot of times they would update it to something a little more contemporary. The Ed Sullivan Show was like a variety show back in the day. He would just have on different guests like Elvis or the Beatles, or in this case, in this issue, a chorus from some Midwestern college, a juggling act. So that was very much a popular program in the 60s. In this era of Marvel Tales, they had to have it sometimes replacing stuff. But you're using your Epic collection, and they're pretty faithful. But I mean, there's just so many things tropes of Spider-Man that I associate with come from this issue. You've got Aunt May being worried about Peter, like he shouldn't go out tonight because she needs him to be safe and he's just a boy. the great page 11 where you've got the half Spidey, half Peter face with the spider sense. And then later on, when he's in shadow in the blackness, you get to see it again. Tests out his equipment. We've got the spider signal. Because I have a hard time when I read these early issues, sometimes not hearing like the voices from the 60s cartoon. And there's a couple pages here where Spidey's swinging through the city trying to find Doctor Doom. And I can hear like that jazz soundtrack from the cartoon as I look at it. And pretty quickly, Doom's kind of like, yeah, something's weird about this Spider-Man. But, he's waiting for the Fantastic Four to come free him. And by page 13, we are off to the races here. We've got Spidey dropping in on Doctor Doom. And the battle begins. And, I mean, what a fight. You've got web pillars, you've got web balls that are filled with fluid, which kind of reminds me later on in the 90s, we get impact webbing, web shields, and this is just like, I mean, what imagination like Stanley and Steve Ditko had for this. There's like an ice beam that comes from the ceiling, these swirly metal balls, the floor lights on fire. We saw the trapdoors earlier, like, the floor is electrified. There's just so much stuff in this. It's like there's a death ray. I mean, just looking at it, like there's no wonder why I fell in love with Spider-Man in this series, because it's just everything is in this book. And then you've got another Doom robot comes back to hold him down while Doom tries to hit him with the death ray, and it's just one thing after another, and this fight goes on for a few pages. And really the only reason it stops is the Fantastic Four arrive, and Doom's like, well, Spider-Man's already given me this much trouble that we're fighting for pages and pages. he rabbits. So, and one thing I appreciate too about the fight is like how much Spidey thinks during it. He's making observations about Doom and just, using Doom's leverage against him. And he kind of has to think about how to get out of certain traps. But, of course, the Fantastic Four show up, and instead of, like, talking to them, he realizes, oh no, Aunt May, I left her alone at home. She's probably beside herself with worry about me by now. So he gets out of there, too. And that just leaves poor Flash, stumbling around and gets caught by the Fantastic Four. And I love how, because, like, oh, it's not the real Spider-Man, he's just nobody, the Thing just wants to beat up on Flash just a little bit. And not saying Flash doesn't deserve it, but, like, just Ben being grumpy for the sake of being grumpy and trying to be intimidating when he's not. And all's well that ends well. Aunt May's okay. He forgot to get the fuses that he sabotaged earlier, but that takes us to the next morning, and Peter checks in quickly at the Daily Bugle, and Betty kind of gives him a compliment. And so it carries over to the following day, where he's starting to have feelings for Betty Brant. But as he gets up to school, there's Flash, the BMOC, the big man on campus, just bragging about his adventure with the Fantastic Four, and how really it was his escape that made Doom run away in terror. And it's just classic Spider-Man. With Peter, I've got nothing but luck, and it's all bad. And he's just got like an exasperated look on his face, and I mean, it's a classic story for me. I love it. What are your thoughts? I've been rambling on for recapping our recap.
This is... I got something in my throat. This is kind of my first, like, big exposure to Doctor Doom, I guess. Like, I know of him, and I've seen him in other things, but not really a character that I can say much about, but seeing him have this big battle with Peter and using like all these wacky like death trap things, like with the pit trap, or this like ice that just comes from the sky, or these weird metal balls. He lives up to his name as Doctor Doom with like all these weird gadgets, just throwing them all at Peter as he just struggles to stand his own against them. But I don't know, it's an okay issue. Like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, the part I was just talking about now with the battle, I really love all that, but like the beginning and stuff where he's like, I'll use this giant spider that I have to contact Peter.
That doesn't make a lot of sense.
And like I said,
but if you're five, it makes total sense.
And like I said, the kidnapping of Flash and stuff. I don't know, there's some goofy stuff, but there's a lot of goofy things in these early stories, and I'm just like,
I know that the Flash dressing up as Spidey and getting mistaken for someone else pops up somewhere in other media, and for the life of me, now that we're recording, I can't think of what it was. But I feel like somebody has done an adaptation of at least that element. Maybe it was the 90s show, because I think it was the 90s show. I think in one of the season 1 episodes I just watched. So you would think I would remember better, but I don't.
But like I said, I do really like Doctor Doom in this. Just the imagination that Stanley and Steve Ditko put into him, like in the 60s, with all this stuff that we don't really have. It's just all that science fiction stuff.
Yeah,
I really enjoy.
I mean, when you look at like the big threats of the Marvel Universe, I think you've got Doctor Doom, like Earthbound. I mean, we're not talking about like Galactus, who could eat a planet.
Yeah.
But just like the Earth villains, not like Thanos. Like Doctor Doom is like one of the best ones. The Red Skull. Like these are big global threats. And I mean, the Green Goblin is up there too for me, but he is more of a personal, he's a localized villain. I mean, he's definitely up there. But like, there's something about Doctor Doom. It's just, he's big because he's from another country and he's the ruler of a country. Like he already has his own nation. And the fact that he fights the Fantastic Four. He's fighting 4 other people with superpowers. And he's a threat to them time and again. And he's just one guy. So, I don't know. He's definitely a favorite villain of mine. I don't know every single in and out, but I've always just had a soft spot for him. What do you think of the kids this issue and the prank?
Like, there's the whole thing, because he starts off hanging out with them at the bowling alley for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden they all, like, decide to turn against him. Which I know, like, they occasionally tease Peter. But that's more like a Flash-specific thing, and they just, like, chime in occasionally. But I don't think they're as, like, hostile to Peter as Flash is, so seeing them kind of, like, a whole bunch of them tag along with him, it's just like, dang. He's, like, at the end where he's, like, he's the real big man on campus, it's just, like, it shows how much power he kind of has in the school. You know, it makes you dislike him more. And kind of feel with Peter as he's getting bullied and stuff.
I think one of my favorite, there's so many, one of my favorite panels from this issue is page 12, the top left one. You've got Spidey checking his equipment for a safety check, and he fires off a web to make sure like that web shooter's working. He's testing his spider light, which it does not get enough usage. I mean, even in like the MCU, like I remember the teaser, the post-credits scene for Civil War, where his web shooter that he got from Stark like shows like a spider signal on his roof. Like that was the coolest thing. I don't think it's been seen really since. I mean, I don't really watch those movies a whole bunch, but it was nice that it got recognized at least once in live action, even if they don't use it again. But yeah, he even uses the spider signal to announce himself when he gets inside Doctor Doom's lair. And like I touched on this when we went over it before, but just the amount of things he does with his webbing in this issue, I just think is super, super cool. I mean, it just made me feel like Spidey can do anything. Like he gets electrocuted and then he uses it to shoot his web and hit Doctor Doom, so then that electrocutes Doctor Doom, so he has to turn it off. And there's a lot of 6-panel pages, 6 or 7, or 8 rather. So the story moves a little bit quicker, I feel, than some of the other ones, where it gets a little. Well, I was going to say it moves a little bit quicker because we have a little bit bigger panels, but at the same time, man, some of these panels are just dialogue. It's a wonder you can see Ditko's art because there's so much talking going on. But that's not a bad thing, because what I love about going through these old ones is just like when I'm waiting for you guys to get out of school and I bring something to read, I know I can read like 2 comics in the 20 minutes if it's a modern thing. But if I'm going to read an old Amazing issue, I'm only going to get through 1 if I'm lucky, because it just takes that long. So I feel like I get a lot of quality out of these old stories.
It's kind of like, what's the one thing on Disney Plus where they talk about like all that Marvel stuff and Japanese Spider-Man?
Oh, the 616 show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they like mention how here it's more, you read a whole lot more.
Oh yeah, and versus the manga that they had.
It's more action oriented.
Yeah. Yes, this is definitely very similar to that. But yeah, I mean, this is a seminal issue for me. I mean, I'm sure I would have loved Spider-Man anyways, because, like I said, there was just 2 Spider-Man cartoons on at the time. You know, the old one, to my memory, the old one would be on during the school week. I remember watching it after school, but then like Saturday morning was like the new one, which I vaguely remember the one that was just Spider-Man. I had more memory of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I mean, it was just, he was always going to be there, I think. But reading these issues, because I wasn't, like, I would get Batman comics, but they were from God knows what. You know, very occasionally would your grandfather get me like a new Batman from the stands or new detective. It would be like these 80-page giants or like these compilations that had like a whole bunch of different stories in it. So it was just all over the place through different eras. But like with Spider-Man, I was starting basically at the beginning and moving forward. The only Amazing I can think of that was new that he got me would have been 275, and that was on a vacation trip. So yeah, for whatever reason, and if you look at my Marvel Tales copy of it, the current issue, because they have a house ad for it, Magnificence, Thy Name is Marvel, it shows Ghost Rider 71, Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man 69, G.I. Joe 2, and The Amazing Spider-Man number 231, When a Cobra Comes a-Calling. So I'm reading issue 5, and currently 231 is on the stands, which some great Roger Stern stuff in there, but this is the only one I read on a regular basis, and I got to go through Spider-Man when he was a kid in school, when I was a kid in school, a younger kid in school, But I think that part of me did recognize the fact that he was in school just like I was and did well in school, and that made me want to do well in school. And I'm sure it formed me in ways I can't even begin to comprehend. But just landmark issue for me. And I love that cover. I mean, it's straight out of a scene from the book. You know, he's got the electric floor death trap. He's firing a laser bolt from his gauntlet, and Spider-Man's web is broken, trying not to land on the electrified floor. Like, this could very well be... It represents this issue so well. And I just adore it. So, any final thoughts on Amazing Spider-Man number 5 before we move on?
Just a solid issue. I'd say it holds up fairly well. In my opinion. Besides, like, the references to the one show.
The Ed Sullivan Show?
Yeah. I feel like there was something else, but...
Well, the spider thing.
Yeah. Besides that...
That's pretty silly. I'll give you that. But I can't take my nostalgia goggles off and be totally fair. Even intellectually knowing... like some of this stuff is ridiculous, like it's still like an A+ issue for me. It'll never not be. So just as a Spidey issue itself, though, like what letter grade do you think you would give this one?
B-.
Where does it compare with, well, the last issue with the Sandman? Is it just as good? Because this is our third full-length thriller, as they would say.
That's tough. Because I really like the Sandman issue.
Yeah.
I think I might like that one more than this, but...
That's fair.
This one's still pretty good.
You know, what I was thinking about the other day when I was talking with your uncle, Eric, about these. It's like issue 1, Fantastic Four is in it because he tries to get a job. Issue 3, Human Torch is in it because he's feeling sick and is doing that demonstration at the school and gives him a pep talk. Issue 5... Fantastic Four, he's got to fight one of their villains, and they come in at the end to kind of play cleanup. So, 5 issues in, and every other issue has a Fantastic Four cameo. Now, whether that holds up for 7, we'll find out next episode. But before we do that, there's something else we have to talk about, and that is Amazing Spider-Man number 6. And Jack, I believe it is your turn to walk us through that issue.
Amazing Spider-Man number 6. Face to Face with the Lizard, from November 1963. In Florida, the lizard terrorizes the locals. Jameson issues a challenge to Spider-Man to defeat the lizard, not expecting him to take it. Peter visits the Natural History Museum to study up on reptiles and goes into action as Spider-Man when 2 hold-up men threaten the museum patrons. Spider-Man then visits Jameson and tells him he will accept the challenge. Jameson goes to Florida to witness the event and brings Peter to take pictures. But Peter manages to slip away from Jameson and sets out as Spider-Man, finds the lizard, and nearly drowns in their first clash. Journeying home to the reptile expert Dr. Curtis Connors, Spider-Man meets his wife, who relates how Curtis has been experimenting with reptile genes to regrow his right arm, which he lost in the war. The serum worked, but transformed him into a reptilian creature. Spider-Man uses Curtis's research to create an antidote, then finds the lizard in an old Spanish fort, raising alligators as his personal army. After a pitched battle, Spider-Man forces the antidote into the lizard, who reverts to Curtis Connors. After reuniting the Connors family, Peter returns to Jameson with the photos of the lizard, but Jameson no longer believes in the creature and destroys them. Spitefully, Peter sends the letter to Jameson from Spider-Man, mocking him.
What were the credits for this issue?
Stanley Ryder, Steve Ditko, plot assistant and art, and Art Smek for the letters.
All right, let's start our deep dive. Since you did the synopsis, what are your some initial thoughts for this issue?
I told you earlier, but I feel like I've read this one before.
I think we got a copy of it, like a mini copy, with Amazing Spider-Man when it came out on DVD or Blu-ray, whatever format. No, it would have been Blu-ray, I think. I would have bought it in Blu-ray, I believe. Oh, you know what? No, it was Spectacular Spider-Man. When we got the early box set for like season 1 or one of those volumes, whatever it was, when Amazing Spider-Man came out in 2012, those were coming out on DVD, those episodes. And we got something at Walmart, one of the rare times we went to Walmart, and it had like a free DVD that talked about Amazing Spider-Man and had like some featurettes on it, and that came with a mini copy of this issue because the Lizard is the villain. Yeah. So it had a reprint of it. So that would make sense then that like you read it on like the plane coming back from visiting them that summer, and so you would have had a version of that back then when you were 8 years old.
Yeah, just to go off of that, you can kind of see how this earlier design of the Lizard kind of mirrors the one in Amazing with his more flat, more human face, or human-shaped face instead of having like a long snout and just being more
the alligator.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to be honest, like the classic Lizard design, the face never really endeared him to me. But I like in the movie how they do kind of channel the Ditko Lizard. But the first time I saw the McFarlane Lizard, I was blown away. I might have seen the cover to Amazing 307 or 308. There was an Inferno crossover, and that kind of gave like everyone their first look at what McFarlane's Lizard was. But back in 1990, when he launched his own Spider-Man title, the first 5 issues were a story called Torment, and it was all about the Lizard kind of voodoo brainwashed and looking for blood and looking for Spider-Man. And writing may not be the best. I mean, he's an artist trying to figure out how to write a 5-part comic story, but I mean, the art in that whole volume is just him at his peak Spider-Man, because he's just been doing amazing for 20 some odd issues. And that's always going to be my favorite Lizard design, is the one McFarlane did. But story-wise, though, love this story. I don't remember when I first read it. I'm going to assume it was maybe sometime in the late 90s when I finally got my hands on like a copy of this. But the 90s cartoon does an excellent job like doing their version of this. So I've always been familiar with it. And of course the Lizard pops up numerous times as Dr. Connors throughout the whole series. So I knew that because of this issue they'd formed a friendship. And so I always liked seeing Doc Connors show up in anything because of their shared history. Like they're friends, but then something can happen and turn him into a villain, and then Spidey's got the dilemma of how do I fight my friend who's not himself right now. And bringing it all around again, like having all that history and baggage throughout the years makes me look at this issue now, and you know, it doesn't bother me so much his not beady little head, but it's definitely like this weird gummy lizard mouth thing. And I love there's one point where he's like writing the letter to Billy, I think. And like he actually cries, like he sheds a little lizard tear. Or is it to his wife or is it to Billy? No, he's writing to his wife, who doesn't get named in this. She gets named later. But we know her as Martha. Why did you say that name? And yeah, he writes a letter to her and the lizard is crying. So it looks funny, but you know, it's a good way to show that Kurt is still inside the Lizard. He's not, you know, fully Lizard yet. Actually, I take it back now that we're talking about it. in whatever Marvel Tales would reprint like the old pinup pages from the backs of some of the other issues, and they would do like these profiles of the different villains and have like a quick, like a splash page of the character, and then give like a quick little bio, and this is the issue they first appeared in. So I knew about his origin from that well before I ever read this issue. One thing that struck me about it is Peter. This is issue 6, and his style of dress seems a little more relaxed, like he's not wearing a tie in some shots. He's kind of got like a black shirt on, like he just feels more casual that way. And he's noticing Betty more, and he's kind of hitting on her a little bit. It seems like he's almost going to ask her out on a date before Jameson interrupts. And like you're starting to see how being Spider-Man is boosting his self-confidence. And so, you know, tying this back into like the movies again, particularly the Amazing movies, there's a lot of flack that the graduation scene gets, and I'm sure we'll bring this up when we get to that comic in particular. Well, there's a lot of flack in Amazing Spider-Man 2 when, you know, Peter runs in and like kisses Gwen when he gets his diploma and high fives the principal on the way out, and people are like, that's not Peter Parker. And yeah, he is he is introverted and keeps to himself and shy, but like you see him, the Peter in issue 300 is not the same Peter in 200 or 100 or 50 or 35 or 1. I mean, one of the things I love about this character too is like he grows. Like, well, he did. And
Literally.
yeah, like he gets older, and his life lessons, you know, change who he is as a person to a degree, and I just wrote that off in the movie as he just fought who would become the Rhino. He just saved a bunch full of people. It's his graduation day. It's a big day for him. He's feeling good, and that confidence is what, you know, makes him swagger a bit on the stage because he graduated. And so I feel like some of those seeds character-wise are in this issue of him. Even looking at his posture where he's talking to Betty, where he's got like one hand on his hip and the other on his head, and like he just, the way he's sitting around Jameson's office, like he feels more relaxed and confident in himself, and I like seeing that. Like sometimes I think we form an image of a character in our heads and think that's how it always is, but if you really look closely, you can see the transformation. Also, I think it's interesting too that, you know, we always think of Spider-Man in New York, and when you think of New York, you just think of Manhattan and web slinging from building to building, but here his adventure takes him to Florida.
To the swamps.
Not a lot of buildings in the swamp.
Yeah.
At all. And so it makes him, you know, a spider out of water in a sense. Yeah. Sorry, dad joke. But like I like how he has to deal with that problem, you know, and his solution is like making like a web oar and like these web paddle feet things.
Yeah. What is he even?
So he can like paddle
webbed swamp shoes.
Yeah.
Is what he calls them.
So he can like get around the swamplands, and I mean it's clever. Yeah, I mean, what else is he gonna do?
Yeah, it's nice to see some more like, I guess, world building. I guess just to see him, because when I always think of Spider-Man, it's always like, oh, he's in New York and whatnot, but to see him like in some other state and totally more rural environment is just nice to see for once, even if it's only issue 6.
Yeah, he's dealt with some interesting threats so far. I mean, the Doctor Doom thing last issue was more of a personal vendetta. It's like, hey, let's get the Fantastic Four. The Chameleon was espionage and selling secrets to Russia. Did Dr. Octopus really have anything? Was he stealing anything?
No, he was...
He was just...
I think he just went mad from the explosion.
From the explosion and was doing stuff? Was he trying to take over or anything? I don't remember. And all I can... We just watched Spider-Man 2.1 last night. So all I have is precious tritium in the brain. And that's not what the comic was about. So... and the Tinkerer, we're led to believe, is like aliens. The Vulture was a simple bank robber.
Yeah.
But like here with the Lizard, it's kind of like a global domination thing. Like he wants the lizards, the reptiles, to take over the Earth. So it's a little bit of a different threat than he's had to face before. And I appreciate that going into it, he's got the peace of mind to be like, this isn't this guy's fault. He was trying to make the world a better place. It backfired. And now he's got this wife and son that are worried sick about him. And, you know, I don't want to ruin their life any more than it already has been. And with quite a few of these early issues, it's science that's gone wrong, you know. Doc Ock was a lab explosion, but he seemed like he was an okay person, maybe. Dr. Connors, just like I just said, wanted to make the world a better place. Now, Flint Marko was already a criminal, but he still got caught in, like, an accident.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these guys, though, there's kind of like a mirror for Spider-Man in some degree. Like, if the spider bite didn't cause him to just have spider powers, but what if it made him have like extra limbs or made him like furry like a spider? Like, it could have gone so much worse than it did for him. And like the Lizard is kind of like there but for the grace of God go I type villains. Like, and I think Peter recognizes some of that. Like there's kind of like a kindred spirit thing. They're both scientists. They both got affected by experiments that didn't go the way they were supposed to.
And I think there's a bit that he sees of like himself and Aunt May and like Uncle Ben a bit.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want Billy and Martha, right?
Yeah.
To like lose that like big male figure in their life, like how Peter and Aunt May lost Uncle Ben.
Billy and who would lose?
Martha? Right?
Why did you say that name?
Oh, I'm gonna swap her.
Sorry. I love that movie, and I'm going to say it on the Spider-Man podcast. I love Batman v Superman, and I love that scene, and you can't change my mind. No matter how many times you try and ruin it with a bad meme. Anyways, so we go to this fight in Florida, and just the fact that like Spidey or Peter has to finagle Jameson to letting him go, and then he's got to get away from Jameson so he can like do something about this, adds a little bit of fun to it as well. And and I like how Aunt May is like, oh well, if you're gonna go with this adult, like it's okay, but on the other hand, it's like, why is this newspaper publisher going with a 16-year-old to Florida? Like, that's a little weird.
Times are different, I guess.
Yeah, times are different. But yeah, you would think, and granted, it's like you have a cast of characters and you're still building that, but you know, just a newspaper publisher has nothing else to do. He hates Spider-Man so much, he's got to make some kind of connection and ruin things. And his only way of doing that is to get a kid to go with him to take photos of it, because everyone else probably wouldn't want to be bothered, like, on Jameson's personal vendetta. So, not a lot of options, I guess, for old JJJ. So what do you think of this big fight in Florida? It's kind of like a castle, what is it?
It's like an old Spanish fort, I think.
Old Spanish fort. A lot of those in Florida, I guess. I don't know. I've only been to Orlando, and really it was just the airport to Disney World. So I haven't really gone through Florida a whole bunch.
Yeah, and this was in the middle of the swampland, so... Again, I'm just going to say it's a little goofy that he has, like, these big old alligators just walking around.
I mean, alligators live in the swamp.
I know alligators live in the swamp, but
I think it would be another thing if it was like alligators in the sewers in New York. Which, actually bringing that up, like this has them firmly set in Florida, but like every other iteration we see is all New York based. And eventually, I mean, the Connors moved to New York. But yeah, it was kind of trippy to go back and reread this and be like, oh yeah, he actually has to travel to another state to meet and fight the lizard. And I appreciate how they trick it up. I mean, there's definitely not much of a formula. Everything feels pretty different issue by issue. And just like last time, I like how the cover represents the contents inside. Like the cover is Spidey falling upside down, what looks like a kind of like a well or something. Like there's just like this stone wall behind him, and the lizard kind of falling after him. And we see that in the issue of them fighting in the fort and kind of falling down into like a tunnel or a well or something.
More towery.
Yeah. So I miss those days. Like we've had some good covers in the modern era, like just great art, but I miss looking at a cover and like knowing what's going to be behind that cover, getting an idea of what this story's going to be. So one of the little things I appreciate about this story. Now, it gets very tropey of how Spidey has to beat the lizard. It's always, getting the formula and getting him to eat the formula to change back into Connors. And yeah, it happens a lot. So, at least here it's the first time, it's fresh, and we get to see the transformation. It sucks that he loses his arm. But I guess, does it fall off? Do they even show it? I don't think they do.
It's just gone.
It's like his hands lose the scaly quality, and then we have a panel of the transformation of his face, but we never see like the arm just like disappear. I mean, not that I needed to, but it sucks for the doc. And I'm getting the issue mixed up with the 90s cartoon. Spidey keeps a secret. He doesn't have any photos of him, right?
No, he does.
Okay, he does.
But he goes to Jameson, and basically
he doesn't believe him?
Yeah. No, because Peter is like, oh, I bought this from an old Indian guide at the edge, and he's just like, oh, so these are fake then. And then rips them. Okay. Yeah.
That's the cartoon then. I think he gets rid of the photos to protect the Connors family. And then where do we wind up at the end? They go back to New York. I'm assuming he gets no money. In fact, he gets a bill, right? Jameson's like, you got to pay me now. Oh, and then we end with him asking Liz out on a date. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because we totally skipped over the fact that he goes to the Natural History Museum.
Yeah.
Because there he saves Liz.
As Peter or as Spider-Man?
As Spider-Man.
As Spider-Man, okay.
Because there's two, like...
Oh, yeah.
Guys, like... I guess robbing it or whatever.
And Liz falls for Spider-Man, starts crushing on him, right?
Yeah. Because when Peter calls her up, she's like... She's waiting for the Dream Man to pick up.
Right, so she doesn't want to talk to him. And that gets us into Peter's competing with himself. Yeah. Wah, wah. Kind of like a Lois and Clark Superman love triangle built for two thing.
Yeah.
Except, they don't have the chemistry that Lois and Clark do.
Yeah. I mean, Peter says, only a guy with my nutty luck could end up being his own competition.
Yeah. See, and that's the kind of like Parker luck I can get behind, where Spider-Man causes a problem for Peter, or Peter complicates Spider-Man's life, or just like an everyday relatable problem. Again, like we just watched Spider-Man 2.1 last night. So stuff like the brooms falling out of the closet, or everyone taking all the food before him, or getting the empty drink when it's when he finally gets a drink and the glass is empty. Like, that stuff just wears thin for me. But these conflicts that his dual personality or his dual lives cause for each other, that's what I appreciate. And then what's going on with Jameson here at the end?
Spider. To like kind of get back at Jameson, Peter sends like a little message to him where it's like, roses are red, violets are blue, I'm still at orange, so phooey to you. And then Jameson gets all mad.
Yeah.
He wants that mass menace.
So comparing this to issue 5, how does this one rank for you? Is it on par, better, worse?
I say it's on par. Because I like the setup to this one.
Yeah.
A bit more, but where I feel like the setup for the last one is just kind of like leading up to the fight is just kind of like, This fight is more like over and done with like in like 1 page. Or really it's 2 pages, but
yeah, it definitely doesn't feel as elaborate or as big a fight. I do like this story a lot.
yeah.
Obviously, I don't have the built-in nostalgia for it like I do issue 5 because I didn't get to this story until later. But no, I enjoy it quite a bit. I'd probably be in the B range for it if I'm being honest. Like it's not maybe A. I don't know because it's not really anything I find terribly weird or out of place with it, other than like teenage kid and his old boss going to Florida together.
Yeah.
Like it seems it doesn't have the weird science of I'm going to talk to you through your spider sense. It feels more like it makes sense, and I like seeing the Spidey in a fresh. I mean, this is only a 6 issue, but I like that we're getting out of his comfort zone and going to Florida, and he's got to figure out a new way to get around because it's not an urban environment for him. So I like that he has these challenges early on. What are your thoughts from your modern high schooler perspective?
Yeah. Besides the whole getting on a plane just kind of by himself and his boss, and I guess just the more weird look of the lizard, I'd say this one holds up pretty dang well in today's context.
Yeah.
I'd say. But I don't know. I've never been to Florida, so I can't comment on how old that part holds up. But I don't know. It's just, like I said, the whole thing about when I think of Spider-Man, I always think of him in New York. So seeing him in more that different environment like you were talking about, it's just fresh, even if this is a really old comic at this point. So
yeah,
give it a solid B at the very least.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. Next time we are going to be looking at Amazing 7 and 8, which is the return of the Vulture and the terrible threat of the living brain. Both of these I'm not quite as familiar with. It's funny too because I talk about like I've been there since the beginning, but I really don't have much of a memory of these as a kid growing up. Well, 7 I do, but 8 was one of those ones I guess I skipped as a kid, although it has some pretty key moments in it. So I'm looking forward to those. And also it's our first returning villain in the Vulture, who in this continuity is not Liz Allen's father. So for you moviegoers, for you MCU fans, yes, we've had Liz Allen. Yes, we've had the Vulture. Not related. But we can talk more about that next time. Yeah. Any closing final thoughts on these 2 issues?
They're just pretty solid issues and hold up fairly well in my opinion. I enjoyed reading them, and compared to like, I feel like as these issues go on, I feel like they keep on improving and slowly getting better.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. They're definitely finding their footing, especially with the Lizard issue. Like, we're not relying on another franchise to bring in other readers. It's just squarely a Spider-Man story. So I appreciate that. Again, it's weird to me thinking how much of the outside Marvel universe is intersecting with these early stories. But we'll see if the tradition continues next issue or next episode, if there are any other Marvel cameos. Anything else?
That's about it for me.
Well, we'll pull the curtain back just really quick. It is towards the end of November as we record this of 2021. We're still in the aftermath of the second No Way Home trailer. And in that trailer, we do see the Lizard in it.
Very briefly.
Very briefly.
But you see him.
But we see him. So what are your thoughts going into No Way Home, which, by the time this gets out, theoretically we would have seen the movie and, we'll know what happens. But any anticipation for seeing the Lizard on the big screen again, or Doc Ock?
Yes and no. Like, I'm really excited to see, like, since we had Into the Spider-Verse a couple of years ago. Three?
Yeah, I think it was 3.
Yeah, because it was 18. Shoot. Jeez, how time flies.
Yeah.
But, so we've already had, like, our kind of big multiverse Spider-Man movie already, but now we're getting it in live action, almost. And I'm excited to see, like, all these live action interpretations of Spider-Man all kind of colliding, especially if even outside of that with Venom and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'm excited on that front, but at the same time I'm like, have we already seen all of this movie? Because that last trailer was pretty meaty, I feel like.
I feel like there's a lot that's left on the table still, because we've barely seen the black and gold suit. I mean, we've seen it in the marketing, but we don't really know what its purpose is or how he gets it or for how long he even has it. So I feel like there's a bunch left. Of course, it depends on what kind of fan you are. The way Sony is with their Spider-Man movies, they release like clips galore until that thing comes out. I know there's been, maybe it was Amazing Spider-Man 2, where like someone put together like all the different clips and trailers and edited what they thought like the outline of the movie was going to be, and they had a really good chunk of movie to watch back to back to back. So hopefully they keep some of the big moments to themselves for the big screen. I kind of feel bad for Sandman, because if you think about, like, Green Goblin had his own movie, and Norman himself popped up 2 more times in the Raimi trilogy. Not to mention, briefly in Amazing 2, Doc Ock had his own movie. The Lizard was the sole focus of his own movie. And, poor Sandman had to deal with New Goblin. I hate that name. And Venom. So he's never had... Well, he had his own story arc. He doesn't have...
that big role.
Yeah, the sole attention. And he's back, and he's still not, because we know that you've got the Green Goblin and Doc Ock and Electro and the Lizard as well. So, poor guy can't catch a break. But I'm excited to see the Lizard again. And yeah, I mean, we'll get to that later tonight, I'm sure. But I thought the effects in Spidey 3 for Sandman were pretty good for back in the day. I think they still hold up fairly well. So it'll be interesting to see how much better it looks now that technology is advanced. God, 15 years almost since that movie came out. So Yeah. Just a quick little... What's your excitement level for No Way Home? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. How excited are you for this movie?
I say 7.
You're a 7?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite live action Spider-Man right now? Of the 3 movies in the 21st century. Sorry, Nicholas Hammond. There's no wrong answers.
I know there's no wrong answers. What I'm thinking, because I like Toby. I like all of them, and that's the problem.
Fair.
It's just like they all were, or like, I don't know. They're like, they do well at some things, and then they're like okay at other things. Like Tom is a good, like, young high schooler Peter.
Yeah.
I like Toby as that photographer, more older Peter, and Andrew's just a good really good Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Do you think the rumors are true? Do you think we're going to see all 3 live-action Spider-Men on the screen at the same time?
I'm not sure. I would like to see them all, but Andrew has been kind of like, But I don't know. It would be a really good surprise if we see them all, though. I would be very happy if we got them all together for, like, one big hurrah for all of them.
Yeah. I was probably at like a 4 or a 5. Then the first trailer got me to a 6. The second trailer's got me at like a 7 or an 8. I'm trying to keep my excitement down because if I think about the prior 2 coming back one more time, like, it's like a 12. And I don't want to go see the movie and be like, well, this movie sucks because they weren't in it, because I made my own expectations in my head. Like, I'm trying to temper it so I can enjoy the movie for what it is and just kind of get excited to see some of the villains again, because we haven't really had that.
We've kind of, I mean, it's not all of them, but we kind of have a Sinister Six happening.
And there's still, like, people on the table, like, unless you're keeping it quiet, like Michael Keaton is the Vulture. I've been expecting him to come back, and all we've gotten so far is a glimpse of him in a Morbius trailer. There was a Mac Gargan in Homecoming, so it's like, is he going to be the Scorpion someday? Like, I'd love to see a live-action Scorpion. We had the Thinker already, so there's actually a ton of spider villains that we've seen in the big screen that could easily fill in that, 6th spot. So whether they're going to have someone, I mean, it's up in the air, which is fine. I mean, we got to have something to enjoy in the cinema. I'm trying to keep my expectations level so I can enjoy it for what it is, because I've had my various problems with the MCU Spidey movies, and I'm really hoping that, this one blows all the other ones out of the water and meets everyone's expectations. So we'll see in about a month, a little less than a month. God, we're like 3 weeks out.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah. So tickets go on sale tomorrow, Spider Monday. Well, tomorrow for us. By the time you hear this, it'll be long past.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm excited. It sounds like Jack's excited. And that's where we're going to leave you today, folks. So I think we're going to close this out. And as a reminder, this is Javi.
And I'm Jack.
Reminding you to keep your web cartridges full.
And stay classy.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Amazing Spider-Man Classics, part of the Spidey Dude Radio Network. You can follow the show on Twitter at ASM_classics. Jack and I would like to thank Joshua Bertoni, Donovan Morgan Grant, and John Wilson for allowing us to continue their work on this podcast, which you can find on the Spidey Dude Network. We would also like to thank Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, John Romita, and all the amazing creators who have followed, making the web slinger one of the greatest heroes of all fiction. Thank you, and Excelsior.